Joining me now to discuss this and more is the Australian's environment editor, Graham Lloyd. Graham, good to see you. Thank you for joining me. Look, here we go again. Another wind farm project has either been put on the back burner, delayed or cancelled. What does this tell us?
Well, good evening, Danica. What it tells us very clearly is that offshore wind is not what it was cracked up to be. It's proving to be more expensive and more difficult than was hoped. Companies that have tried it have largely lost their money, and in the case of Equinor, they're returning to their core business, which is oil and gas, and they're really giving the offshore wind business away, particularly in Australia.
Yeah, well, they're going back to oil and gas, where they belonged. I mean, doesn't that just tell you that that's where they know that the money is, and not in renewable wind farms?
Well, that's certainly, I mean, people have been calling the end of fossil fuels for a long time now, and there's no easing really in the demand for them. The problem that this causes, though, is it leaves a huge hole in the centre of the federal government's aspirations to have a carbon transition. A lot was predicated on having first hydrogen and then offshore wind to replace coal as it exits the system. And the situation now is hydrogen is not going to be a feasible prospect. Offshore wind looks like it's going to follow suit. And so that's where really there needs to be an alternative.
Oh, look, absolutely. Now, look, this week we also learned that one of the key transmission networks underpinning Victoria's transition to renewables, well, that's been delayed by 2 years. This is the VNI West project, which involves about 240 kilometres of power cables between Victoria and New South Wales. Graham, it was scheduled to be completed in 2028, but this has now been pushed out by 2 years. But look, Labor, we know federally, needs transmission lines. It needs about, I think it's about 10,000 kilometres of it to reach its renewables goals. All at the expense mainly of farmers whose land is being razored by the poles, but there are so many roadblocks. When are they going to get serious here about keeping the lights on in this country?
Well, this is the question that's sort of coming sharply into focus. The delay in this transmission line is a significant problem for the Victorian economy and South Australia particularly, because it was supposed to join up these renewable energy spaces and wind projects to the north and be a lifeline, if you like, to New South Wales, where they still have a lot of coal generation. That is no longer going to be in place before the time that the large coal-fired generators in Victoria are supposed to close. So the big question is, do they have a replacement, or do they have to keep the coal open for longer?
Well, we know that there's been, the odd coal project or the odd coal mine that they've had to extend the life on. It was in New South Wales, because where they talk about this big, bad energy resource, but right now we need that big, bad energy resource to keep us going. I mean, that's just the reality. Now, look, I'm interested to get your take, Graham, on Chris Bowen's apparent backflip on gas. He's been demonising gas for years, but has now announced a review into the sector and has said while we're one of the world's biggest exporters, Australians are entitled to have access to our domestic supplies. Graham, we've been warned for years that we're running out of gas. Why the sudden epiphany?
Well, it looks like the reality has finally dawned on the federal government that gas is going to be a crucial part of the transition. There was probably an expectation that hydrogen would fulfil some of that role, but that's clearly not going to be the case. So now we're having a process to see how there can be more gas for the East Coast, with very little detail about what will be done to increase domestic supply. There's an eye being cast at the high level of exports, and there's fraught territory there, because a lot of that gas is contracted, and there's the discussion about a reserve policy, but that will only apply to new projects, not existing one. The hard work needs to be done in getting those new processes into development, rather than trying to pinch it off what is currently being sold to our closest and dearest trading partners.
Yeah, and you hope that Labor stops just talking about it and actually puts it into practice, because we've been warned that the East Coast could run out as early as next year, Graham. It's just a disaster. Graham, Lloyd, nice to catch up with you. Thanks so much for joining me on the show this evening. Really appreciate it.